Hi everyone, I've got a fun video for you today where I'll be counting down the top 5 most powerful cards from the Nightcrawler Hero Pack. I'll just be talking about the aspect and basic cards in this video. This won't be a Nightcrawler Hero review. I'll be analyzing each card using some of the metrics I talked about in my recent card evaluation strategy video, looking at things like efficiency, speed, and flexibility. In my subjective ranking of the top 5, I'll try to account for both the breadth of decks that these cards impact, as well as the ceiling these cards reach in maybe certain archetypes or certain heroes. I've done my best to account for both solo and multiplayer gameplay, although I admit most of the games I play are in solo. And finally, with each card, I'll recommend some other hero packs I would purchase if you want to make the most out of these Nightcrawler pack cards. If you're considering buying Nightcrawler, or if you've already bought Nightcrawler and you want to improve your deck building options, I hope that can be a useful part of this video as well. So getting it started with number 5, we've got the upgrade Under Control. This is a 0-cost card, attaches to a minion, has a response after a hero defends against attached minion's attack and takes no damage, deal 4 damage to the attached minion. So the total cost of this card is the 1 resource effectively to play it from hand, as well as a hero defending against a minion's attack. So we can't just ignore that part of the cost, right? That's worth about a resource of value, or it takes away the opportunity for us to attack for 2 or thwart for 2, whatever it may be. So I put this total cost around 2 resources, and 2 resources for 4 damage. That's a decent efficiency. That meets my target I generally shoot for, which is the 2 damage per resource, because we can generally build good decks with that sort of efficiency throughout. So if a card meets or exceeds that, that really can justify it in some of our powerful decks. It's a flexible card in the sense that it only costs 1 effective resource, but it does need to attach to a minion, so it won't always be a playable card from hand. Of course, that means this will get better against certain scenarios, such as mutagen formula, or with certain minion-based modular sets. It will also get better in multiplayer, where there's simply more encounter cards drawn every round, means more likelihood of there being a minion in play for you to stick this to. We generally don't, it's very rare for us to actually defend using our hero against a minion attack, because usually we'd rather just kill those minions as a way of not suffering any negative value from them attacking at all. Or we'd rather just defend against the villain's attack because they attack for much more damage. And so when we're playing our defense combo cards to boost our defense, right, it actually goes to use because of how big those villain attacks are coming in. But because of the total damage this card deals, the relatively minor cost, I think this is a reasonable excuse to defend a minion's attack. I think that's a reasonable use of the basic power. One thing that's kind of interesting about this is defending against a minion attack makes it much easier to trigger things like unflappable or hard to ignore, cards that reward us for defending against an attack and taking no damage. Usually, of course, we do that against the villain, and usually we need to get a pretty high defense to do that. But with just 2 or 3 defense, we can usually defend against a minion and won't have to take any damage. So I like this card just kind of in isolation. Again, in a situation where there are enough minions for us to put it on. One of the cards that'll show up a bit later in this list that this card works really well with is Change of Fortune. This is a card that pays you off for defeating enemies in the villain phase, which is exactly what this does. You defend during the villain phase, and so after that happens, the response kills the minion in the villain phase. So I'll talk a bit more about that card later, but I think if I'm playing this card, it's generally going to be in that archetype. So we'll save some of the discussion for there, but for my number 5 card, we've got Under Control. This generally works, like I said, with Change of Fortune, so that comes in the same Nightcrawler Hero Pack. So I don't think there's too much we can add to this from other hero packs. One I might mention is the Cyclops Hero Pack. So Cyclops has cards that combo or synergize with tactic upgrades. So this is another option for a tactic upgrade. Cyclops himself has 2 defense, so it's reasonable to expect him to defend against a minion's attack and not take any damage. Cyclops is not generally a defend-heavy strategy. Usually has a lot of allies to defend for him, so maybe it's not even the best home. But I just wanted to point that out, that it is a tactic upgrade. Okay, moving on to card number 4, we've got Come Get Me Bub. This is a 0-cost event. Hero action, discard cards from the encounter deck until you discard a minion. Put that minion into play engaged with you. Heal 3 damage from your identity and give your identity a tough status card. So the total cost for this one, again, if you just look in that upper left corner, it's like a 1 resource cost card, but we have to engage a random minion from the encounter deck. So of course this can vary widely from an enraged symbiote with 2 health to Wrecker with 8 health, or a 6 health tough minion, or Mystique with 9 health tough minion. So we probably have to be careful what scenarios we're bringing this out to play against. I think on average, if we say the average minion has from between about 4 and 6 hit points, that should take about 2 to 3 resources of value to defeat. So the total cost for this card was the 1 to play it, plus 2 to 3 for defeating that minion that comes out. Say that the total cost is around 3 to 4. The effect we get is a tough status card, which I value at around 2 resources, blocking any villain's attack. And then 3 points of healing, which is probably about 1 to 2 resources as well. So it kind of averages out. It doesn't really impress you so much. It kind of just sneaks by. Especially once you consider the variability that can come with this card, right? Drawing a cheap minion, of course, that's nice, but you can really set yourself on a bad path if you roll into the wrong minion. So in our high power level decks, we usually want a bit more consistency than this. The reason I've put it in my top 5, however, at number 4, is because of this card's ceiling with the heroes Thor and Drax. There could be some others I'm missing as well, but I think these are the 2 I've seen talked about the most in the community, and which I certainly agree with. In fact, my most recent video is a Thor Come Get Me Bub protection deck taking on the mutagen formula scenario, which of course has many minions in it. But Thor, of course, having that ability to draw 2 cards when he engages a minion each phase. So Come Get Me Bub being another player card that allows him to engage a minion in the player phase. Of course, he'll naturally draw minions potentially in the villain phase. But having access to this in addition to his identity-specific card, in addition to Face the Past, gives him a lot more consistency, being able to trigger that ability every turn. And if it's kind of even on the cost versus value of Come Get Me Bub alone, it's definitely to our advantage to get that draw 2 from Thor. That makes me pretty happy to play it. I was pretty happy to play this from hand every time in that gameplay video. The other hero I mentioned is Drax. So Drax is someone who, by the mid to late game, his attack can get so high, 4 or 5 attack, so he can really clear these minions with ease. There's not much risk of getting a minion in play that you'll have to stick around for a few turns. Drax also really wants to stay in hero form as long as he can. Whenever he flips to alter ego, he has to reset his vengeance counters. So having a way to not only just heal overall, but especially with that tough card, being able to take the attack onto himself as opposed to blocking for an ally, that allows him to trigger his hero form responsibility, letting him either get another vengeance counter or draw a card, which is really nice to have with him. So for those 2 heroes, Drax and Thor, I think the Come Get Me Bub decks you can make with them are quite powerful. I wouldn't just go throwing this in your favorite protection deck and expect that to boost the power level tremendously, but for those guys, I think it's a good fit. Don't have any packs to recommend for this one. Obviously, the Thor pack is a good hero to use it with. The Drax pack is a good hero to use it with. It's not so much an archetype into itself like some of these other cards will be. Let's go on to number 3. And number 3, this is the aforementioned Change of Fortune. So 1 cost upgrade, play under any player's control. Response after you defeat an enemy during the villain phase, exhaust this card to draw 2 cards. So, wow, a 2 cost upgrade that has the potential to draw 2 cards every turn. That type of value is absolutely crazy. Granted, we need to meet this condition of defeating an enemy in the villain phase. So, right, again, it'll be better against multiplayer scenarios, better against scenarios with a lot of minions. But even, drawing 2 cards and paying 2 resources for it, this card will pay you back the first time you trigger that ability. And even just triggering it a second time, you come out way ahead on resources there. So just incredibly strong resource generator at its full potential. The cards I sort of like to play around with this are Energy Barrier. So Energy Barrier, being this 2-cost upgrade, comes in with 3 counters that allow you to prevent a damage and deal a damage to another enemy. So you get 1 or 2 of these in play, the villain attacks, you redirect the villain's damage into a minion who you've left on just 1 or 2 health. That tends to be a pretty effective way to trigger Change of Fortune, especially because it's coming from an upgrade which you've put into play. You're not dependent on drawing a particular event in hand in order to trigger this. Several defense events will do some damage. Powerful Punch, one of the reprints actually in Nightcrawler's pack, is reasonable efficiency, but you sort of, it feels bad to hang on to it in hand at the end of the previous turn, because then you draw 1 fewer card, 1 fewer new card, or you spent 1 fewer resource that turn. You don't want to just cross your fingers and hope you draw it if you're drawing up to a full hand. You'd rather just kill the minion proactively to not have to deal with it attacking you. So Energy Barrier is a card I really like. This comes in either the Miss Marvel Hero Pack or the Mutant Genesis campaign expansion. A hero with Retaliate can make good use of Change of Fortune. Hero like Black Panther from the core set, just having that natural Retaliate. Captain America is a hero who gets Retaliate when he has his shield out. So I like, with Retaliate and with these Energy Barriers, like I said, I like that sort of proactive approach of getting that minion killing effect on board, not being dependent on what you draw up to hand size. And even then, Energy Barrier is a card we're generally happy to play anyways. Captain America's shield, you're going to want to get that in play anyways. So, slotting 1 Change of Fortune into a deck that might want to play Energy Barrier anyways is a really big power upgrade to this deck. You can build around it even more if you want. Be careful that you're not playing cards so inefficient that you don't really get the benefit out of drawing 2 cards. There's some pretty bad examples, like First Hit is just a pretty weak card overall. Powerful Punch, like I said, I think I'll play Powerful Punch a reasonable amount of time, but it's not like crazy efficiency. So I guess all I'm trying to say is you don't necessarily need to warp your entire deck around this effect, but you just get some Energy Barriers, maybe your hero gets Retaliate somehow, and it's a really cheap resource generator. Drawing 2 cards, like I said, very few aspect or basic cards that can generate 2 resources every turn. So this is something that really stands out to me, something I've really had fun with finding ways to take advantage of that value with different heroes. At number 2 in my list of top 5 most powerful cards from the Nightcrawler Hero Pack, I've got my first and only Ally on the list. So allies are a very strong card type overall in Marvel Champions, but when I started making these videos, I didn't want to just be talking about allies the whole time. So I sort of defined my list as cards, how powerful they are relative to the existing options in the card pool. So, right, allies are very strong, but in order to make it in my top 5, it's got to be better, it's got to improve upon the existing options for allies in the game, because in a practical sense, when we build our deck, we are limited in the number of allies we can play, not literally, but just because of the ally limit of 3 during the game, we can't just overload ourselves with allies. So I'm a little bit more picky when it comes to judging allies. But this ally is one that I definitely think earns its spot on this list, and this is the Rogue ally. So Rogue is a 4-cost ally with 2 thwart, 2 attack, and 3 hit points. If you recall, if you watched my card evaluation video, I talked about baseline efficiency with allies, where if we sort of ignore the text box for now, how do we feel just about the allies' stats? And in this case, Rogue doesn't quite meet baseline efficiency. She would need either 1 more hit point, or cost 1 less, or have 3 thwart or 3 attack. But of course, let's add on her ability here. So deal 1 damage to another friendly character in order to, until the end of the round, have Rogue gain each of that character's traits and add that character's printed thwart and attack to her matching powers. So there we go, there's some additional stats for Rogue to bring her more in line with baseline efficiency, if not exceed baseline efficiency. In general, we want to do this ability on a hero, ideally with 2 thwart or 2 attack, We can do it on an ally, but an ally's hit points, that's like the uses of that ally. So we would be taking away an eventual use of an ally if we were to target them with Rogue's ability. Still could be the right play tempo-wise and given the situation, but we don't really add value in the same way that we do when we tag a hero. Ideally, right, our hero is generally going to have 2 thwart and or 2 attack. So Rogue will be thwarting for 4 or thwarting or attacking for 4, which is a really, really strong use of an ally. It's a really strong way to thwart for protection, especially in solo where we're sort of on our own to find threat removal. Protection doesn't really have great options for threat removal, so we usually look to our allies anyways. Rogue being able to come down, thwart for 4 right away, that can clear a decent chunk of side schemes in the game, which is protection's biggest weakness. So that's great. In a multiplayer game, we don't always have to radically shape our deck to account for threat removal in the game. But look, it's still just such a strong ability that Rogue can thwart or attack in multiplayer. We even have more options of heroes to tag to get the stats we want. So she's very strong there as well. Because of how high this ratio is between the value of her thwart or attack and the consequential damage, right? Usually 4 thwart for 1 consequential or 4 attack for 1 consequential. Rogue gets extremely good when we start granting her additional hit points or healing her over the course of the game. So something like Protective Training, a 2-cost card that gives her 3 additional hit points. Those 3 hit points translate into 12 thwart or 12 attack. So 2 resources for 12 thwart or 12 attack or some combination of the 2 is like insane, absolutely insane efficiency. We get the game time card as well if we're playing Protective Training specifically, which allows us to heal the bearer of the Protective Training and ready them. So it's this 1-cost card, which in Rogue's case translates into, again, 4 thwart or 4 attack, which is just extremely efficient. I made use of this in one of my recent videos, in my Magneto video, and previously in my Iceman video, building this deck around Rogue, playing 3 copies of Protective Training, 3 copies of Game Time, really just maximizing how strong her individual uses are. Even though just kind of on her own, the total value, if you don't combo her with anything, it is maybe around where other allies are. With such a high power with her activations, though, right, she really, really turns healing into efficient plays for us over the course of generally a long game. But like I mentioned, even game time, that's tempo as well. That's immediate value that you can have. So Rogue, right, she's an X-Men. Obviously, you're going to play her in lots of X-Men decks. But even in a non-X-Men deck, where protection is sometimes desperate for thwarting options, I think Rogue is legitimately one of the best thwarting cards that protection has. And with massive upside if you want to build around her a little bit. So easy decision to put her at the top 2 for me. But she's not quite number 1, because at number 1, we got an absolutely ridiculous card. Ironically, not even a protection card in this protection precon deck that comes with the Nightcrawler Hero Pack. But it is the Justice card from the pack, Gunboat Diplomacy. This is a 1-cost event with Alliance. We'll get back to that here. As a hero action, exhaust an X-Force character and an X-Men character. Remove X threat from among schemes in play and deal X damage among enemies in play, where X is the combined thwart of the 2 exhausted characters. So let's just make up an example of how this might play out. Let's say we've got not even the craziest thing out. Let's say we've got a 1 thwart X-Force character and a 2 thwart X-Men character. We exhaust them both. Their combined thwart is 3. We deal 3 damage to enemies and remove 3 threat from schemes. So this was a 2 effective cost card that did 6 points of value between 3 thwarting and 3 attack, which is an efficiency of 3 points of value per resource, which is tremendous, right? My target is usually 2, so 3 shows that this is something really worth building around. Now the cost there is that we had to exhaust an X-Force character and an X-Men character. So in general, we would like this to be allies, because allies, when they activate normally, they take consequential damage, which is their sort of countdown timer for how many times we can use them. When we exhaust them with Gunboat Diplomacy, it's like we're using them, but they don't have to take the consequential damage. It's almost like we used them, we healed the consequential damage and got the attack damage as well. So using our allies works out pretty nicely there, as opposed to using our hero, where our hero gets a free activation every turn, essentially. So if we exhaust our hero due to this, of course we can. The efficiency might be good enough to do that anyways, but we lose the ability we lose the value from our hero thwarting or attacking that turn. Now, of course, we need to actually have an X-Force character and an X-Men character in play in order to even play this. So early game, right, we might need to exhaust our hero to do that. We might get one ally in play. But if at some point in the game we've got an X-Force ally and an X-Men ally in play, those are going to be the go-to targets to exhaust in order to play Gunboat Diplomacy. So of course, the example I gave was even a slightly mediocre example, but we can easily find two thwart allies or two thwart characters if maybe our hero has two thwart. There's a few cases where we can even get up to 3 thwart in our allies, whether it's Professor X being our X-Men or Pete Wisdom being our X-Force character. And so the value here just gets tremendous, right? Spend 2 resources, maybe exhaust a 3 thwart and a 2 thwart character, so we remove 5 threat from schemes and deal 5 damage, all for 2 resources. Just tremendously efficient. This is the type of upside I really like to look for, to know if this is something worth building towards. Of course, it does have some setup cost, but the payoff is massive. The payoff is so worth it that it's worth doing this. Where I've seen this be even crazier is in multiplayer. So in multiplayer, there's far more characters on the table, far more people playing allies. So because this card has Alliance, this is the mechanic that allows other players to help pay the costs of a card. That includes the resource cost or whatever comes before this cost arrow in the text box, which includes exhausting the X-Force and X-Men characters. So we can have other players exhaust their allies for us to be able to play this. In practice, in these multiplayer games, I've really not seen this cost be an issue of someone just being stuck with it in hand, as long as you're building your decks around it to a reasonable degree that I would expect you to do if you're playing this card. So just tremendously valuable card. Even that sort of mediocre case is still really strong. We can just go crazy in the ideal scenario. I saw this in one game with Deadpool was the hero who has the Cable ally who can get up to 4 thwart. And actually at this game we had Cable with the 4 thwart. We had Rogue on the table who got up to 4 thwart. So Gunboat Diplomacy removed 8 threat from schemes and did 8 damage. I didn't even mention yet here, the damage is we can distribute it among enemies however we want. We distribute the thwart however we want. So there's no risk at all of being inefficient with overkilling minions or over-thwarting side schemes. The upsides here are just absolutely tremendous. So just such a powerful card. Some cards you may be interested in order to help you maximize the value of Gunboat Diplomacy could be Children of the Atom. This comes from the Magneto Hero Pack. This is a card that grants your X-Men allies the X-Force trait, grants your X-Force allies the X-Men trait. So if you want to play a deck, or if you just want to be more consistent in getting an X-Force and an X-Men character out on the table, that's a card that can help you there. I don't think it's really that hard to do without playing Children of the Atom, but it's a nice, I don't want to call it training wheels, but it's just a nice handle there to help you enable that. If you don't quite think your deck's going to be consistent enough to meet those conditions. If you're looking at hero packs that just come with the kind of allies that you would want to use this with, the Deadpool hero pack, I mentioned how strong it was simply because of the Cable ally. Otherwise, you just want to look at the Justice, X-Men, and X-Force hero packs. So for X-Men, we've got Phoenix. She even has 3 thwarts. So if you use Phoenix, if you use your hero to pay the cost of Gunboat Diplomacy, you get 3 thwart there, which can be really strong. Comes with a couple other Justice allies. Gambit comes with some other Justice allies in the X-Men. As for the X-Force, you really want the Next Evolution campaign expansion. This comes with several 2 thwart X-Force Justice allies. So because of the different traits you need to match here, you need to cobble a few packs together here to maximize Gunboat Diplomacy. But it's It's a really powerful, really fun, really unique thing to do as well. There's no other deck quite like it. Really, you build your deck around enabling this card. This is maybe the first card I've ever seen that has made me want to play Vigilante Training, which can shuffle Justice cards from our discard pile back into our deck. A card that offers no efficiency on its own, but if it's helping us play this hyper-efficient card more times in a game, then that's something I could sign off on. So there we go. Those are my top 5 cards from the Nightcrawler Hero Pack. So for the rest of the video, I'm going to talk about the remaining cards from the Nightcrawler Hero Pack. These are cards that I didn't think were quite powerful enough to make my top 5, but there still can be some use cases for them. And especially if I've missed any really powerful uses for them, I encourage you to let me know in the comments, because I can certainly miss some things as I do my personal reviews. We'll start with the 2 allies I skipped over. So first is North Star. North Star, 3 cost, 3 hit points, 2 attack, so that meets my baseline efficiency. So already, if all you own is the core set, you buy Nightcrawler, North Star is going to be one of your best cards because allies are simply that strong. But compared to other allies in the game, I didn't think North Star was quite worthy enough to make it into my top 5. Has this interrupt ability. When a boost card is turned face up during an attack, deal 1 damage to North Star, cancel all boost icons on that card. So, right, because we need to deal 1 damage to North Star, it's not really adding value to us necessarily. It just gives us an additional way to use North Star, which is effectively healing, assuming this is an attack that's coming into our hero. This is a cool card. It enables some of the perfect defense cards like Unflappable and Hard to Ignore, helps you react to what your boost card is, since that's sort of an unpredictable aspect of that strategy. So you draw your 3 boost card, ruins your whole turn because you can't trigger your things. Activate North Star to cancel those boost icons. If you don't need to cancel any boost icons, then you don't need to use North Star. So it's really nice flexibility, really nice that it's reactive, unlike some other defense events that proactively add defense to us that we might not have needed. So I like that aspect of North Star. I'm sure I'll build a fun, perfect defense deck using that, but he's not really jumping out to me, compared to the abundance of excellent allies in the game, but definitely a fun inclusion in this perfect defense strategy. Playing an ally that matches what this strategy is trying to do, always a really satisfying thing. The last ally from the Nightcrawler Hero Pack is Gambit. Gambit is a 3 cost, 4 effective cost ally with 3 hit points, and XX thwart an attack. So when Gambit enters play, you look at the top 3 cards of the encounter deck, tuck 1 under him so that only the boost field is visible. So where we generally want that to be is 2 boost icons that would let us hit baseline efficiency for Gambit. When I played Gambit for the first time, I got 0 boost icons, so I may be a bit prejudiced against him. He does have the upside of getting 3 boost icons, or a very, very rare 4 boost icons, which of course is tremendously valuable, would be a great thwarting option for protection, just a solid value play. In most decks, you also get the information of what's on top of the encounter deck. You take away that high boost icon that the villain might have used to activate against somebody. So there's a good little upside there, as long as you can hit 2 or 3 boost icons. But I think the risk of hitting 0 or 1 boost icons, it's too great for me to want to include this in my high power level decks against challenging scenarios. Again, there's a lot of great allies. We can play more consistent allies that also give us, effect over baseline. So I haven't been playing Gambit that much, but again, a super, super fun card, especially if you want to live on the edge a little bit. Next card I'll talk about is the player side scheme that came with this pack, Astonishing X-Men. So a 1 cost player side scheme. Comes in with 5 threat, notably does not scale with player count as many of these player side schemes usually do. That's because the effect doesn't really scale with player count, so we'll read that here. When defeated, stun and confuse each enemy in play. And then there's also this responsibility: after an X-Men character defends against an enemy attack and takes no damage, remove 1 threat from this scheme. So kind of a nice little part of the card, might contribute 1 or 2 threat removal from this. Not a huge part of the card, I would say. But when defeated, stun and confuse each enemy in play. This is a really, really strong ability. Of course, only against scenarios where the villain is not steady or stalwart. If we try to sort of efficiency cost it out, Astonishing X-Men costs 2 resources to play, costs maybe about 2 resources to clear. Maybe we removed 1 from an X-Men defending and taking no damage. 4 threat, that takes about 2 resources to clear. So 4 total resources put in. We stun and confuse each enemy in play, generally just the villain. So even just getting that off on the villain, each status I generally evaluate at about 2 resources. So that comes out that about 4 resources of cost trigger this effect, and then 4 resources worth of value on the other end. So I think it's a fine card. It can stun and confuse multiple enemies. If it's a multi-villain scenario, that can be really nice. Think about doing this against the 4 Horsemen. This might be one of the best cards in the game against the 4 Horsemen. It can hit minions as well. Generally, we don't really plan to stun and confuse minions because if we just defeat them, they won't activate either. So we'd rather just kill them when we have the opportunity. So look, it's decent value. It's didn't quite make my top 5 because I liked some other cards a bit better, but I could see myself putting this in some decks, especially Protection. Having access to Confuse is really nice. I guess the problem there is Protection is not an aspect that has an abundant amount of thwarting in general. So I don't know if Protection can really afford the resources to thwart this in the middle of the game when there are encounter cards to worry about. Perhaps in a multiplayer setting where the Protection player can play this and someone else, can thwart it more effectively than the Protection player, that can be a strong play. Cable, of course, Cable from the Next Evolution expansion box. Cable, his whole shtick is dealing with player side schemes, so this might be a worthwhile one to put in there. So look, a solid card. I don't think any hero really breaks this card. If you can defend frequently without taking damage, this is certainly a fun card to put in your deck. It's not a very fast way to reduce the threat on here. So like I said, it's kind of a tempo hit to play this and wait several turns to defeat it. But just a decent card all around, just not in my top 5. Next, we've got Riposte. This is a 1-cost defense event. Interrupt: when your hero defends against an attack, it gets +2 defense for that attack. If you take no damage from that attack, deal 3 damage to the attacking enemy. So the thing I don't really like here is that when we're defending and getting +2 defense for an attack, that probably means we're defending against the villain, because we're defending for 2 or 3. Most minions aren't going to be attacking for enough for us to have gotten value out of that extra 2 defense. So if we're getting value from the defense, we're probably defending against the villain. And if we take no damage, we deal 3 damage to the villain. And the villain is not really a great place to spend resources putting damage on for most of the game. Most of the game, we're trying to address threats. We're trying to develop until we have enough stuff out to make that final push. So the resources we're spending here, the 2 resources, we get maybe about a resource of value from the +2 defense, maybe about a resource and a half of value from 3 damage to the villain. But that villain damage is just not really something I'm excited to spend resources on for most stages of the game. Now, on the other hand, I would be more satisfied with dealing that damage to a minion, but then, we're defending against a minion attack, which is using our basic power. Most likely, part of the cost of this card goes into that 2 defense, which is not usually necessary against minions that don't have as high attack as the villain has. So it's kind of split in the 2 different use cases of this, getting 50-50 of you never get you're never satisfied with both parts of this card when you play it. So it could have a home in the Change of Fortune archetype, It is a way to defeat a minion during the villain phase. So of course that's one of the reasons why it's in this pack. But especially outside of that, I'm not really going to be playing this card very often, I anticipate. Last card in the pack is the other non-protection card that we got. This is Combined Forces, 1-cost aggression event. Has Alliance, like Gunboat Diplomacy, same cost as Gunboat Diplomacy as well. Exhaust an X-Force character and an X-Men character. Defeat a non-elite minion as the effect. So, in general, if we're defeating a non-elite minion, it's probably got 4, 5, 6 health. We spent 2 resources. So, I mean, that's a reasonable exchange. But because it doesn't have nearly the upside of gunboat diplomacy, I'm not nearly as interested in investing the deck building resources and the inconsistency that comes with needing to exhaust an X-Force character and an X-Men character. Right, as far as tempo is concerned, we could, in most cases, I would think, just attack with both of those characters to defeat this minion. So if that were the case, then the effect of this card is just healing the consequential damage from both of those allies, which wouldn't be the worst use of a card, but right, if we're trying to meet this cost of having the X-Force character and the X-Men character in play, sort of the inflexibility that comes with that is not really getting paid off by the magnitude of the effect here. So I could be wrong on this one. There's probably scenarios with beefy enough non-elite minions that this can feel good to play. Maybe a Tyrannosaurus Rex, for example. Sure, that's fine value if you can beat it there. But I think in most cases, you're not really going to be impressed with the value from this card. So I don't rank it super highly. And with that, we've talked about every new card in the Nightcrawler Hero Pack, including my top 5. There are 2 reprints in this pack, the Power of Protection as well as Powerful Punch, which we talked about. Powerful Punch, if you don't own it already, it has come in the Mutant Genesis pack as well. Not a hugely efficient card, but it is a nice way to trigger Change of Fortune, to trigger stuff that wants you to defend without taking any damage. Wanted to focus on the new cards from the Nightcrawler pack, but want to acknowledge these reprints as well. And there we go. We've gone through the whole pack. So thanks a lot for watching. We'll probably keep, when there's a period between releases, we'll probably keep going back and doing these reviews of hero packs that have already been released, even though there's kind of a delay from when they've been released. And let me know if you disagreed with any of my takes, if there's something I missed with any of the cards that I ranked lower than you would have expected. And love having those sorts of discussions. So leave a comment there. And thanks again for watching. We'll see you in the next one.